Hi everyone, Tori here with another scrapbooking process video. This one is called To the Moon and Back. So today I am inspired by this orange and blue flare, this photo of this adorable little girl that I met in Bolivia, and I'm also inspired by the color theory class by Wilna Furstenberg over at Studio Calico. So I can't really tell you how I did the background because that would be giving away information in the class, but you can just take a look. I used acrylic paint and watercolor, and I really want to go with complementary colors, and the colors I'm going with are orange and blue. And I found them in this flare, and I thought they would be really cute with this photo of this little girl, and it would also be inspired by the second or third lesson by Wilna Furstenberg in this class. So I'm going to show you the rest of the scrapbooking process video, and I hope you're taking that class too because it's amazing. I think the registration is closed, but Wilna Furstenberg has many other classes over on her website, wilnafurstenberg.com, and I'll link that up below for you. She is an amazing artist, and she's totally inspiring, and I'm so happy that she's teaching a class at Studio Calico. It's an amazing class. So lately, I've really been trying to do more mixed media projects because it's something that I want to learn how to do, but it's also really terrifying, so I haven't really been showing you that many mixed media projects, but maybe in the future as I get more comfortable with it, I might show it to you. My problem is that I always feel like it looks bad, but I'm sure it doesn't look as bad as I think it is. Like they always say, you're your own worst critic, right? So, I don't know, maybe I'll try to show you some, and maybe you guys can be my worst critic instead of me. Okay, please don't say mean things. But if you have ideas for how I can learn how to get even better, I'd love to hear them, so feel free to type them in below. So I normally do 12 by 12 pages, but I recently won a 9 by 12 Studio Calico handbook, and I decided that I was going to make an album all about my trip to Bolivia, and that would be in that 9 by 12 album. So this layout I'm doing is a little different size for me than I normally do. It's a 9 by 12, and I had fun doing something different. It was like a totally different way to think, because I'm so used to doing square, and then this is a rectangle. But it was actually not that bad. I actually enjoyed it, and I really do like the way that the page turned out, even though orange and blue, that combination isn't really normally a combination I would do, but I'm totally doing that because that was the challenge for one of the classes, the class lessons, to use complementary colors. So that's why I decided to use these orange and blue. So I started with that page. It was a piece of white cardstock and did the mixed media blue watercolor and acrylic paint on the background. And then I decided that I wanted to mat it on some orange paper. So I just grabbed some really old orange cardstock that I had in my stash. The dark orange one that you're seeing came from a paper pad, which I think I've had that paper pad for years, so I couldn't tell you where it came from. And then the one with the like lighter orange on it, I think it came in an old Studio Calico kit, or somebody sent it to me in the mail. Actually, I think somebody sent it to me in the mail. And I had cut off the branding strip, so I don't know where that came from either. But I decided to use two different oranges, the lighter one and the darker one, because the darker one just seemed too much to me, but the lighter one didn't seem like enough. So I wanted to do two different ones. So I'm using a lot of adhesive, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot, because I didn't do it on watercolor paper, I just did it on regular cardstock, and it warped a lot. So I was trying to maybe straighten it or flatten it out by putting a lot of adhesive on the back, and it helps a little bit. There's still a little bit of a crinkle, but it actually doesn't bother me that much. I think it just goes with the overall look of the page. And but if it really bothered you, you could totally use a watercolor cardstock or a mixed media cardstock, and that probably wouldn't have such a horrible warp. So most of the things that I'll be using on this layout just come from my stash, and the reason is because I made this layout the day before I received my Studio Calico March kit, and so I didn't have that kit, and I had already killed the February kit, so I was just like, I wanted to scrap, so I was like, I'll just use what's in my stash while I'm waiting, and use some of the stuff that I'm learning from the class that I'm taking at Studio Calico, and put that together. And it was actually a really fun project because I got to use a lot of orange ephemera and orange things, because I don't really use orange that much because I actually hate that color. But so I have lots of orange. But it was a good use for what I had in my stash, and I like the way that it turned out. And I mean, maybe I need to use orange more because it looks so pretty on this layout. So I began by doing the background, and I wanted to just add to that distressed look. So I pulled up the sides a little bit, and I ripped a little tear into two places on the layout, one in the top left-hand corner and one in the bottom right-hand corner. And that's a trick that I learned from Nicole Jones 911 here on YouTube. She does that a lot, and I just wanted to try it, and I actually like the way it looks. It lets a little bit more of that orange peek through. Then I started figuring out what I was going to do with this adorable photo. And so I began grabbing pieces from my stash, just little random pieces. And I knew that I wanted to use lots of orange. So I'll begin by pulling out a whole bunch of orange pieces and laying those on the page. I thought I would use that blue doily that somebody sent to me in the mail. Sorry, I can't remember who. And I'm going to play with it for a really long time, but then I'm not actually going to put that on the page. All of the embellishments will be grays and oranges and a little bit of red in the orange sort of tone. So while I'm doing that, I'll just tell you about the photo. This past November, I went with a group from my church to Bolivia on a short-term mission trip. We were there for 10 days, and we were working with street children and women in a women's ministry that works with women who are on the street, helping them get out of prostitution and things like that. And this little girl was one of the girls that we met while we were there. On the second or third day, we did a home visit where we just went to somebody's home to see what it was like and spend time with them and get to know them. And at this home, there was probably 10 children, and they were all running around, and so we were just playing with them, and they spoke Spanish and we spoke English, so we didn't understand each other. But one of the things I've realized with little kids is it doesn't matter if you understand each other or not. You just play and have fun, and they'll love you. So while we were there, this little girl immediately came over to me and took my hand and sat with me, and just, she just warmed my heart, and I just fell in love. And so just before we left, I snapped this photo, and I had snapped a whole bunch of photos, but I think this is my favorite photo of her, because it just, the light and beauty in her eyes and the hope and joy that she has, it just amazes me, and it reminds me how good we have it. I mean, this little girl lives in poverty. She doesn't have anything. She doesn't have very much. The clothes she's wearing are probably the only clothes she has. She maybe eats one meal a day. She lives in a little tiny house with her mom and her siblings and her mom's sister and her mom's aunt, I think. And she doesn't have anything, but she just has so much joy and hope, and it just meant a lot to me, and I really wanted to remember it and document it and give it a really beautiful page because she's just stunning. And so I had a lot of fun making this page about her, and using the things that I've been learning from that class, and also using some colors that I don't normally use, or colors I normally use together. I think it turned out well too. So a little bit about what I'm doing here. I'll just get back to the page. I decided I wanted to use all orange and gray embellishments, and I do try to use that blue, but it doesn't end up making it. And the way that I decided to put it on the page is to put it in 3 clusters. Now, if you think your embellishment challenged, that's okay. I often feel like that. I know a lot of people feel like that. But I'll share some of the tips that I use or things that I've learned over time that help me, and maybe they'll help you too. So, so the tips are I start with picking a couple places on the page, and I usually choose 3 because the rule of thirds, and I try to place 3 embellishment clusters around the page. Sometimes I do a little bit more than that, but I usually go with odd numbers, so 3 or 5 or 7, I guess, if you were going to go with a lot. On this page, I've used 3. I use that top left-hand corner, then I use the top left-hand corner of the photo and the bottom right-hand corner of the photo. And the way that I make those embellishment clusters is by clustering up a bunch of embellishments in each of those 3 places. Now, how do I choose the embellishments? Well, I typically try to choose big, medium, and small embellishments, and I also typically try to use embellishments that are in the same color family or within a couple of colors. So one of my favorite things to do with embellishments is the color match, using colors that match the background pretty closely or match something in the photo. Another thing that you can do is use complementary colors or contrasting colors. In this one, I've used the complementary colors of blue and orange. And what it does is it makes the colors pop more because they are really complementary. So the blue in the background pops and the orange pops, and it really helps the photo stand out from those colors. Another thing that I like to do is ground my embellishments, and what that means is using big objects or things like washi tape or a little bit of patterned paper to ground all of the objects with something big, and then you can use smaller or medium-sized things around it. So on this layout, I have used the doilies as a grounding element for the photo, but I also used some washi tape strips underneath the photo. And I also just stuck a little piece of that, a patterned paper along the left-hand side of the photo. I'm also using 2 other grounding elements. I'm using that large moon and then that large octagon orange frame shape in the bottom right-hand corner. Once I have the largest embellishments or the largest objects down, then I'll add the medium, and then after the medium, I'll add the small. So in terms of medium embellishments, I have that fun shape up in the left-hand corner of the photo, and it says, "Do you know how cute you are?" I also have that hello diamond and the "to the moon and back," or "I love you to the moon and back" sticker on some orange cardstock in the bottom right-hand corner. The "this" in the top left-hand corner is also a medium-sized embellishment. So once I decide where I want my medium-sized embellishments, then I move to the smaller ones, and I sort of cluster those or put those around the medium and large objects, and it sort of ties it all together. So I'm using a number of different medium-sized ones here, like a feather die cut, some ephemera from Maggie Holmes ephemera, crepe paper ephemera pack, some buttons, a flower, paper flower, and other things. And I sort of just cluster those around those 3 areas. Now, one of the things to sort of bring continuity to the page that you can do is use items or types of embellishments in multiple places. So you'll see that I've done that by having buttons in all 3 or 2 of the clusters, and that way it ties your eye around the page as you're looking at it. Another example of that is that orange jewel that I have underneath the "this" in the top left-hand corner, and the one that I just glued down there to the moon in the back. And that also draws your eye along the page because you can see the different layers of things in different places. And I just love using tons of embellishments. If you've watched my other process videos, you know that I'm not cheap on my embellishments. I love to use a ton of them. I love using them in multiple places, and I love using my hot glue gun on them too. One more tip I have for those of you who feel like you might be embellishment challenged is to try to use embellishments of different weights or different textures. And by different weights, I mean some things that have a heavier presence on the page and some things that are a little lighter. And you can do that through using things that are darker and using things that are lighter, or just through size, or through like the type of embellishment. So for example, the paper that I have on the page, like the moon, this transparent shape, the "to the moon in the back" sticker, and to the "do you know how cute you are" thing, they're light, they're flat, they don't take up a lot of space. But I also try to use some embellishments that are different weights or different textures. So for example, the buttons and the flare and the chipboard, hello, diamond, they are a little thicker than the paper. But then I also have a couple elements that are even bigger. And like, for example, that paper flower is a little bigger and takes up a little more size or width on the page. Another type of embellishing that you can do is random, when you have things floating off and they're not all connected. But on this page, I've gone with clusters, and I really like the way that it turns out. I like that the little girl is still the focus of the page. The focus isn't all of the embellishments, but because there's so many embellishments and they're all the same color, they don't really draw away from the photo. They sort of draw your eye into the photo, and she's the focus. And I had a lot of fun embellishing this page. And my last tip, I have one more tip for you. If you struggle with embellishments, try to use a lot. Like, just go for it. Just use a ton. Use a whole package on one page if you want. Or use a whole bunch of things. And if it doesn't feel like it's done, add some more. That's sort of my rule of thumb, is I just keep going. And I add a little bit of this and a little bit of that and just keep going. And then when I walk away, I can come back and add a little bit more. But just add until all of those clusters are sort of full and there's no empty space or anything just hanging off. And the last thing my page needs is some journaling. So I use my black Staedtler pen and just add a little bit of journaling on the bottom of the page. And that's it. The page is done. I had a lot of fun making it, and I hope you learned lots and had fun watching too. Thank you to everyone who subscribes, likes, and comments, and entered my 500 subscriber giveaway I'll be announcing in the next couple days. Thanks everyone. Have a lovely day. Bye.